Hi guys, Squirrel here. Welcome to another TMCN video. It's been a little while since we've had a TMCN. Actually, it's been quite a while since we've had a TMCN, and I do apologise for that. That's entirely down to me. I shall try to do them more regularly. I'd like to do at least one a month, but I can't promise it, but I will try. So, I've been inundated with questions on this theme. Oh, by the way, in case you're new to the channel, or this is the first TMCN you've ever seen, and you're sitting here thinking, Squirrel, what the heck is this? Is TMCN? TMCN is This May Contain Nuts, which is a series, it's a Q&A series. You ask the questions around a particular theme and I answer them. So it's meant to be interactive, or as interactive as a video can possibly be. You can submit questions by clicking on the link in the video description. All the questions in today's video are around the theme of technology. Now, technology is something I love, it's something I've always been interested in, so I was very, very happy to see that one. And especially happy to see well over 400 questions come in from you guys, which is absolutely nuts. I mean, that's the most we've ever received. I've had to go through them, we've had to sort of filter out the duplicate ones, and all that, and we've still got hundreds, like literally hundreds of questions. I can't answer them all. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to do another theme for the next video, I'm going to carry on. This is going to be technology part 1, and the next one's going to be technology part 2, because there's so many I want to answer. So that's the way it's going to be, and then the one after that we'll have a new theme. So we're going to have 2 videos on technology just to get through the chunk of questions, because obviously you're as interested in it as I am. Today's video is going to be in the Renault Range T. This is not the SCS Renault Range T, that is not yet available, and Lord knows when it is, because I don't. But it is in the mod spreadsheet. The mod spreadsheet, if you go down to the Renault section, you will see a link to the SCS forum where this truck is posted. The mod spreadsheet is also linked in my video description if you want to go to that. I've coloured it a kind of twitch purple, although in this sun it looks more kind of pink, but trust me, it's not that pink. We've got a weird yellowy light going on. I'm not a massive fan of Renault, you know that. They're pretty much my least favourite. But I've tried to make it look as nice as I can. It drives reasonably well. The engine is very revvy and quite noisy, I think. Now, I don't know if that's true of the Renaults or not, but that's the way this mod behaves. And I've just tried to make it look as you know, as decent as I can. If you jump inside the truck, you'll see I've got some of the Sisal mod accessories which are compatible with this. I've got my Wally down there, my little VW camper van. Mrs. Squirrel's got a knitting. We've got some Wattle the Water. And up the top there, I've got my little Pac-Man. Because I like Pac-Man, because Pac-Man. So what we're going to do is we're going to fire off out of here. We're going to take the ferry. I'll show you where we are. We're on the very little island of called Longyearbyen, which is, well, it's about a 40-hour ferry journey north of Norway in Finland. So it's pretty far up. And it's certainly in the Arctic Circle, that's for sure. We're going to take a ferry into, I think it's Kirken we take the ferry into, and then we're going to drive down to here, which is Kemi in Finland, right there. So that's the plan. Let's start her up. We'll hit the road. And then we're going to start answering some of your questions. So let's pull forward. I'm using 2 mods. Well, I'm using quite a few mods, but there's 2 mods of a particular interest. One you're going to see immediately now, which is the gate opening mod, which you've probably seen before in my videos. I use it on and off. It tends to work pretty well these days, like that. I kind of like having opening gates. And the other one is by a guy who did a foggy weather mod. I don't know if you remember the foggy weather mod, but his latest mod, which is not yet out, it will be out very soon, is what I'm using. And you can see the foggy weather, the sun, the horizons. It has something like 400 skyboxes in it, so you'll see a heck of a lot of variation. As you can see there, he's even put like an Aurora Borealis in there, because we're so far north. It has textures for the moon as well, so it's a pretty decent mod, and it will be available soon, but I can't link it to you at the moment because it's not yet freely available. Right, now we could We could go for the double trailer. Don't know if we're going to struggle with it, but we could take it anyway. Let's grab that. Take job. We're not completely kitted out for heavy hauling. So if we come across a steep hill... I think there's a steep hill coming out of Kirkhen, if I remember. Out of that ferry port, so... Lock and load. We might have to keep our momentum going when we leave there. Right, we've got a long ferry journey ahead of us, so let's get moving. And then once we pop out the other side, I'll start answering those wonderful questions. Also, I think when we come out the other side, the ferry port is going to get interesting. As ferry ports do, but with double trailers, they get even more interesting, so this will be fun. Still, if I get stuck, I can always do some knitting. Thank you very much for all the questions, by the way. TMCN is entirely based on your input, so thank you so much for sending all those questions in. And I hope you find my answers interesting. I do tend to stay away from questions that are of a, how shall we say, things like a religious or political kind of nature, because I don't want to, even on my stream I stay away from those topics, so anything, you know, around politics or war or religion, I'm just not even going to bring into the mix. I've said that before, but I'll say it again because I did see a number of questions and theme suggestions such as war, which is not something I'm going to do because it will inevitably get political and argumentative on what is meant to be an entertainment channel. So that's, you know, that's my reasons for that one. Right, embark to Kirkhen, 41-hour ferry. That's a long way. That's almost 2 days on a boat, that is. Let's see what we get when we get here. Okay, 7:20... Oops, wrong button. 7:28 a.m. So we'll leave the main lights on just for now. But the sunrise, obviously, we'll have to kill lights at some point. Very narrow ramp. Yeah, I think if I remember, we've got to get out of this U-bend here, which is going to be interesting. And then down the bottom of the road there, I think there's a heck of a climb, so we're going to have to get some serious momentum going through there. Right, where's our exit point here? I think this is it. Mind out, Mr. Photographer Dude, here we go. Just keep fully left as much as we can. Not hit that car. And then we'll bring it back over. Because bizarrely enough, this is the exit lane. Which doesn't make any sense really, the way it's all laid out, but never mind. Nothing to declare, that sounds good to me. And then we've got a right turn. I've got two sat-navs. We have a built-in one, but the wheel kind of covers it, hence why I added one to the windscreen there, in case you're wondering why have I got two sat-navs. I just find it slightly easier. Okay, we might have to just let this guy go. I'm kind of beginning to regret taking the double. Okay, just round this rock here, I think it climbs. So we need to get in a good gear. I think once we get off the coastline, we should be fine. I don't think there's any particularly big hills after that. Shall I drop down to side lights now? We really don't need those lights. Okay. Yeah, here's the hill. Let's floor it. See what I mean about a noisy revvy engine? Let's keep that momentum going. Oh my god! No, it's not having it. It's not having it, guys. It's just too much weight for it. Do you know what? I thought I put a big, 33 tons. I thought I could put a big engine in this thing, but it just, the rev drop off. It just happened so quickly. Like, we got to the top and then the revs just went... Okay, this could be interesting. Let's try a hill start. Nope, it's not having that. Nope, it just does not have the power to get up here. Okay, we're going to have to... given the amount of vehicles that we've got behind us, and the fact that I cannot move, we're going to have to cheat very slightly here. And just move ourselves forward a touch. And then continue our journey. It's unfortunate, but that's sometimes the physics of this game. Pretty certain that we could have got up there for real. Because I'm sure this engine... I'm sure I configured like a 520 brake or something. Loads of torque in this thing. But it just didn't feel it. Coming up that hill, it just dropped off massively. Like, foot flat on the floor. See, look, it's okay up here. Oh, hang on, look at the rev drops. The rev drop, look at that. It's really struggling with 33 tons. Anyway. We're out of there. First question comes from Diamond Tiger 99, and he says, what do you prefer to play on, console or PC, and why? Console or PC and why? Okay, well, we don't want any kind of PC and console arguments here. I've got consoles in the house. I mostly don't play on them, but I'm a PC guy. And why do I prefer that? Well, with a shooter, if I'm playing shooters, like say I'm playing Rainbow Six or something like that, I prefer mouse and keyboard. I really do. There's so much more control than you get with a controller. I know there are some people who are very, very skilled with controllers. And I do okay with controllers, but I have nothing like the freedom that I get with a mouse and keyboard. I can adjust my DPI sensitivity, I can spin around, I can get fine control. Just so much more control and flexibility for me with a mouse. When it comes to not shooters, as in simulation, which is what I obviously, you know, the channel's based on simulation. When it comes to simulation, quite simplistically, there's just nothing that beats a PC. The sheer amount of equipment that you can get for a PC, the setups that you can create, the multi-screen setups, not to mention the kind of the indie games, you know, look at things like this is only on PC, things like My Summer Car, you know, is only on PC, OMS is only on PC. There's a reason for that. It's because they're a lot cheaper to build titles for. There's no licensings to pay. There's many reasons for it, and just the openness of a PC platform means that there's lots of hardware that you can just plug in and use. That's the reason I prefer to play on PC. The downside of a PC is that there's no level playing field. If I'm racing against 18 other people in a race, we've probably got vastly different equipment. We're not all sitting there on our Xbox One with a Logitech wheel plugged in. Some of the guys in there might have, you know, a £50 second-hand wheel, and some of the other ones might have triple screen monitors, hydraulic setups, you know, Husqvarna brakes, Fanatec wheels. You know, there's just no kind of level playing field in that sense. So when you're racing or doing any other competitive stuff, you do wonder if it's coming down to equipment as well as skill. That's the downside of the PC. Strengths and weaknesses. But my preference is PC, for all the reasons I've stated, just to answer your question. Now, let me just slow it down here, because it is getting a bit narrow and twisty. Next question comes from Codfish and Carnival. I presume they're two separate people. Squirrel, what has been your favourite version of Windows so far? Crikey. Crikey, mate. I remember Windows 2 point something. I remember 3 coming in, 3.1. Oh god. I remember going up to 95. I remember the world's loudest retarder on the Renault. What the heck? Okay, that's a lot of momentum right there. Let's kill some momentum. Yeah, Windows 98, Windows XP, NT, Vista. you know, the list goes on and on and on. I've used Linux variations, many Linux variations. But the question is, the favourite version of Windows, I would have to say probably two of them. XP. XP in that kind of generation of... 1 second. Get my gear right. In that generation of Windows OSs that didn't really have full control, they required cooperative applications to run. XP was probably the best one in that sense, and then Windows 7 was one of my favourites. I think since then it's kind of gone downhill a little bit. I think they got it wrong with a lot of things when it went to 8 and then to 10. I mean, 10's okay, but anyway, 7 was my favourite. 7 and XP, I'd have to say. Next question comes from Benny. Benny says, what was your first impression on the first video games and how they have grown to what they are now? The first impression on the first video games, how they've grown to what they are now. I'm not exactly sure what he means by that, the first impression on the first video games. I mean, I can give you my thoughts on how video games have, you know, come from where they were to where they are now. I'm not sure what you mean by first impression, but anyway, I'll try to answer as best as I can. I think I've been blessed in some sense that, you know, I was there at the birth of home computing era. So what a lot of people now call retro is what I grew up on. Back then, you know, games were about gameplay because, yeah, and graphics were secondary. Quite literally because hardware was just so limited. Like, CPU power back then was in single-digit hertz. You know, not like what we have now with gigahertz. Back then it was single-digit hertz, like 8 megahertz and things like this. It was ridiculous. You know, all the power was on a single chip. There were no dedicated graphics chips. Memory was in kilobytes, not in gigabytes. You had 8-bit audio chips that had to be programmed by hand by audio guys. It was, you know, pretty difficult back then. And to make matters worse, you plugged the whole thing into a TV, like a low-resolution TV. I'm keeping this thing revving. I don't trust it up this hill. I'm being overtaken by the look of it. Being overtaken by a truck with no physics. Lol. Oh, it's a Scania. The Scania overtakes the Renault up the hill. How ironic. And then he backs off on a bend. Chicken. That was a heck of a lot of revving. Keep your eye out for the beautiful scenery while I drive, by the way. There were no dedicated monitors back then. It was all, you know, running on your TV. The dedicated monitors came later. All of that, though, all that kind of hardware setup really limited the complexity and the size of gaming, of games themselves. When you loaded a game back then, you expected it to just load off one cassette. Yeah, you put your cassette in, you press play on your cassette player. It loaded into memory, you waited around for a few minutes, and then you played it. Everything just loaded into memory. If you had a save game, if you wanted to save your game, like say you're playing Gauntlet and you're on level 154, and you wanted to save your game, you had to go and find a blank cassette, or buy some blank cassettes, save it onto a blank cassette. When you came back to it a few days later, you worked out what had happened, you've got no save game. Why? Well, because your sister recorded her favourite pop chart off the radio straight onto your blank cassette, because that's what you did back then. You recorded the charts off the radio, even though you wasn't allowed to. And you're all using the same blank cassette. So there was like this massive industry in blank cassettes back then. It was hilarious. Some of the young guys probably like, what? Cassettes? Blank cassettes? What are you talking about? Tape drives? What are you talking about? But this is how it was. This is how things were back then. Adventure games were probably an exception to that rule in that they would sometimes be on more than one cassette or come on both sides of the cassette or whatever. Because they were so big, you'd have to load separate sections off different cassettes. But there was a lot of like homebrew stuff back then. You're living in an era when 1 or 2 kids in the bedroom could come out with a chart winner. Well, what that meant was You had a huge diversity of games available, but you also had a huge quality of games available. There was some utterly pants games, and some fantastic ones. And if you wanted a review, if you wanted to know if you want to, you know, should I buy this game? Where can I get a review? Well, all the reviews were done on magazine. You could easily find yourself buying a rubbish game, and then a couple of weeks later finding out in a review in the magazine that it's rubbish. And you're like, yeah, I know that now, but I've just spent £10 on it. Everything was boxed back then. You know, there's no downloading stuff. It was all boxed on a cassette. Later on it went to CD and that kind of thing. Later on it went to DVD, etc. Playthroughs or cheats, like, they were hard to come by. They would appear in magazines like weeks or months later. It's not just the games themselves, it was like the whole ecosystem behind it was completely different. Nowadays, it's just so easy to take what we have for granted. Like powerful PCs, powerful CPUs, dedicated graphics cards. We've got multi-channel sound. Drive space is just endless. We can download pretty much anything digitally. We can even buy it. There's not even box games. We can just buy stuff off Steam now. There's day one patches. You know, online playthroughs you can watch. You can even watch pre-release stuff. You can even back games that are being developed. I mean, it's crazy. So things have changed hugely. But the bottom line is that the best games back then were all about gameplay. Like, sure, as things evolved, you had, you know, oh my god, look at the graphics on this, you know. Every year, the graphics were getting better. And a game would come with, like, pre-rendered footage at the beginning as part of the story, and you'd be looking at it going, oh my god, imagine when the games actually look like that. But we do that now. Even now we've got stuff. Adverts on TV, not actual game footage, because even now there's still more performance that we can have, you know, if we pre-render it compared to if we're trying to do it in real time. So, like I say, to answer the question from Benny, back then games were vastly different, and so was the way that they were developed, bought and sold. You couldn't patch games on day one. The game had to be sold in a state that was playable, because once it was put on cassette or disc, that was it. It was never going to get patched. If there were bugs in it, they would get shipped, and that was that. Nowadays, they can release games like Car Mech Sim 2018 came out with all kinds of bugs in it on day one. It's taken weeks to fix the problems. But that seems to be okay. Back then, if you'd have had bugs like that in a game, unacceptable. So yeah, things have changed a long way. Were they going to be in another 30, 35 years? Who knows? That's the question. Sebastian Ludgar? I think that's how we say Ludgar? What is the best technological advancement development you've experienced in your lifetime, and why? Do you know what? I had to think about this one. There was all kinds of things I could come up with. All kinds of stuff that has just technologically moved on and advanced and changed our lives. Not just in computing, but in audio, in, you know, just engines, just, I mean, you could just go on, just think about anything. Everything's moved on. But I would have to say, in my lifetime, the mobile phone. The mobile phone, you know, I could have picked all kinds of things, but the mobile phone is pure revolution. It's a pure game changer, and it's still doing it. I don't think we've even seen the end of the revolution when it comes to what the mobile phone is doing to change everybody's life. I think it's pretty hard for young people now to understand what it was like before the mobile phone. You know, the idea that you can't, you know, you couldn't just get in touch with somebody or message them like any time that you felt like it. You couldn't blog, you couldn't record your life, you couldn't capture all the moments on the camera, you couldn't just, you know, pull the phone out when you see something amazing in front of you, start recording it. Nowadays, when people go to gigs and stuff, they're all stood there with the phones in the air recording it. I don't know what they're doing with all this footage, but they're all recording it, aren't they? Things never get lost. Well, you can't get lost, can you? You know, it's like, where the heck am I? Bring up Google Maps. Oh, there I am. How do I get to this station? Boom, there you go. It'll even say turn left, turn right, go over here. Any piece of information that you want to know, don't matter where you are, you can look it up. Of course, that's destroyed pub quizzes, because everyone's just sat in the corner now with a mobile phone getting all the questions right. So that's one of the downsides. With the phone, you can just interact with people instantly. Like, you never have to be alone. People have online worlds now. They can be connected to thousands of people. Heck, I'm connected to over 500,000 people via my YouTube channel. That's insane. But I can get my mobile phone out and just message people straight away. I can post something on social media and just connect to thousands of people. The thing about the phone, though, is the mobile phone now, is it just combines so many technical achievements, and it puts them all into one little device that has completely transformed us as humans, and it will carry on to do so. And I think that's why, for me, it's the biggest technical achievement. It's the biggest game changer. And look outside the window, guys. Oh my god, it looks good. Next question comes from Noodle Wrecker. Noodle Wrecker 7. What do you think about consumer VR gaming? Well, I've got a HTC Vive. I don't have a Rift, although the Rift price has dropped considerably. Consumer VR. Obviously the PlayStation VR's come out as well now. Microsoft's got one in the mix coming out. You know, everybody's having their own take on it. It's all pretty much the same thing, but it's all, you know, different platforms it's marketed for, different price points, different exclusives. The usual thing that happens in the gaming industry. I would say that consumer VR right now is a nice start. I think the resolution is not high enough. The frame rates are not high enough. Percentage of the population that tries VR get motion sick just even using it. And I think that number, that percentage will come down once the technology gets better. Once the frame rates and resolution are a lot higher, I think that will come down. It's easy to get motion sick in current VR because with a lot of things it can struggle to keep the frames going, and even that kind of delay can make you feel sick. Currently, I think, you know, making VR titles is pretty much a loss-making achievement. Probably the PlayStation VR is the most cost-effective way to get into VR. I think it's about half the resolution as the Rift and the Vive, if I remember. But the Rift and the Vive, you know, now can use each other's titles. They used to be, like, if you built something on the Vive, it wouldn't work on the Rift. Whereas now, I think they opened it up on the Oculus. There's like a cross-platform thing you can get, because they've realised there's just not enough... There's not enough fish in the sea to be, you know, keeping your own exclusive pond. It just doesn't work. So now they've kind of opened things up, which means you can develop on one platform and you'll be able to run it on the other, you know, once they make it cross-compatible. I think the current headset is the problem. Like, the headset is big and bulky. It's like that not because that's the best design for a person to wear. It's like that because the technology has to make it that way. It's like anything that starts out, it's big and clunky and cumbersome, and it gets better and smaller and over time, faster over time. And that's the way VR needs to go. But the problem with the environmental aspects are not going to go away. The fact is that if you want to use VR properly, you need a fairly decent sized room. Let me slow down. It's probably 53 here, I imagine. You need a decent sized room to do it in, yeah? At least like a 3 by 3 meter, something like that, ideally. Anything less and you just risk smashing into things when you're swinging your arms around or moving about in this virtual world. Now the problem with that is that's going to be harder to solve that problem. You know, new houses, particularly in the UK anyway, new houses are getting smaller. Like, the room sizes are smaller, the garden's smaller, everything's smaller. They don't give away as much space now because they can build more houses on a plot of land if they make them smaller. So there's always going to be the struggle of where people can actually set up their VR. Even when it's really good tech, where are they going to set it up? They don't have the space for it. And I think that's always going to be a limiting factor. But the VR brings immersion, it brings depth perception, and they are really powerful motivators. The ability to interact with things with your hands is so natural that VR, I don't think, is going to go away. Unlike the 3D TV. which I never bought into, by the way. Next question from Krish. Krish says, do you think technology will eliminate the use of humans in the near future? Eliminate the use of humans? That's an interesting turn of phrase. If so, do you think it's a good idea? What, to eliminate the use of humans? I probably think that's not a good idea, actually. How's that? Let me just check my fuel level. I've been waffling on here. Why isn't it waffling, by the way? It is an A. Why is it waffling? That should be an O. Anyway. I think it's possible that mankind could eliminate itself using technology. You know, the Cold War kind of brought that threat. It's also possible that technology can just go wrong and cause widespread destruction. Films like Terminator, with its Skynet, War Games, AI, Ex Machina, all these have touched on the idea of us creating things that then go on to become sentient. And then they kind of rise up against the human masters or whatever and try to take over. The usual thing. It's a sci-fi story. But it's a possibility. That's the thing. It's a possibility. I think technology will move on to become more implanted. I think technology will start, you know, as in physically being implanted on your person. I think it'll start off by fixing things. Yeah, fixing what's broken. So, you know, if you're hard of hearing, or you've got sight loss or limb loss, that kind of thing. First of all, it'll start by fixing that. We'll use technology to fix these things. Later on, I think we'll start to use it to enhance things. And by that I mean, you know, more acute vision, or vision with a wider spectrum, so that you could, if you want to, look in the infrared or ultraviolet range of light. Super sensitive hearing, enhanced strength in your muscles. All of this stuff will probably be used by the military initially, and then later on it will make its way into the consumer space. And I think technology will eventually find its way into the fashion side of things. You know, the idea that perhaps you can just have eyes of any colour and brightness, you know, or even wake up and change your eye colour through some technology. Maybe you'll be able to just grow hair quickly and instantly to any length or shape you want. So you can use technology as a pure fashion item at that point. Who knows? I think... Let me change gear. I think humans and technology will always be inseparable. You know? And I think we're gonna have to integrate technology into our body if we're ever going to leave this planet, because we simply cannot survive in space without technology. It's a matter of fact. And we can't live on this planet forever, can we? So I don't know about your idea of eliminating humans in the near future. It's one possibility. But I'd like to think that it wouldn't happen. I'd like to think that we will prevent that from happening. But who knows? Next question from WooWoo200. Hello, Paul. Do you think that one day technology will take over all human jobs? Crikey, you guys, like, are you technophobes? What is this? I think technology, right, let's break this down. Taking over jobs. Technology is a combination of invention and discovery. That's basically what technology is. A manifestation of invention, our own discoveries, through our research efforts and engineering skills and all the rest of it. Now, we as humans, we've been using our minds to enhance and manipulate our world pretty much ever since we started fashioning spears and hatchets, which was quite a long time ago, like pre-Bronze Age type stuff. I don't think that's ever going to stop. And jobs, what you call a job being, you know, taken over by, you know, human jobs being taken over, what we call jobs, they're actually, jobs are products of commerce and industry, really, if you think about it. And since both commerce and industry are driven by technology. Technology moves on, so must commerce, and so must industry. So what I'm trying to say is, in a roundabout way, is that the industry and commerce are always changing. They're always coming up with new jobs, and old jobs are being destroyed. It's a continual process brought about by our technological advancement. That has not ever stopped, and it will never continue to stop. You know, but if you think about the millions of researchers, scientists who are making all these discoveries, think of all about, you know, the new industries that spring up, like the silicon industry, yeah? The silicon chip industry. It's only been going 40 years. You go back more than 40 years, it never existed. Think of the sheer numbers of jobs that are in the silicon industry now, the electronics market. It's phenomenal. None of those jobs existed before technology brought that. But at the same time, think about all the jobs destroyed because of automation, mechanization, robotics, replacing humans with machines. Why? Because it's cheaper. So whilst technology creates jobs, it also destroys them. That is a continual process. The world itself is in a constant state of flux, and you have to evolve if you want to survive. That's the way it is. If you see that your kind of specialist skills are no longer going to be in demand in the future, well, you better start thinking about retraining, because the shift, you know, the wave will not wait for you. It will push you through, it will push you out the way. But you can also ride it. So to answer your question, Mr. Woo Woo, no, I don't think technology will take over all jobs. Because, well, surely it has to be somebody's job to decide what needs doing. Kappa. Good question. Right, where are we? I've been driving and talking and talking and driving. Bad Shot Gaming, otherwise known as Aiden. How much RAM could a Ram truck ram if a Ram truck could chuck Ram? Or something like that. No idea. Dinan Van Gelder says, what do you think of robots in hospitals? Robots in hospitals. Well, robots are going to be in hospitals, cafes, hotels, bars, restaurants, high streets. It's inevitable, mate. If the cost of running machines is economically advantageous over hiring a human, that's what's going to happen. You know, industry taught us that. Mass production taught us that. Thousands of people sitting in sewing factories being replaced by giant machines weaving things. It's always going to happen. Machines can operate 24 hours a day as well. That's the other thing, or nearly 24 hours a day. Humans can't do that. They don't go on strike, you know? They don't get sick. Might break down. As for hospitals, well, maybe you'll see them kind of running the quiet jobs initially. Maybe you'll see them running around cleaning. Maybe you'll see them ferrying, you know, drinks and things around the hospital. That's how it'll start, I imagine. Utility type stuff. I wouldn't mind a robot helping. I wouldn't mind a robot bringing me a cup of coffee if I wanted one. But I think when it comes to talking about my health and well-being, I'd rather speak to a person, thanks. How far have we got? Oh my god, 200 Ks. Okay, that's good. I thought we were running out of miles then, because I was going to say I've got plenty of questions left. Liam! I think you just put Liam. I don't know what his second name is. What do you think is going to happen to ETS2 when self-driving trucks and cars start becoming more a majority on the vehicles on the road? Okay. I'm not sure why you picked ETS2, but we'll go with it. Self-driving trucks and cars, they're already here, aren't they, Liam? in technology terms anyway. We already have the technology, we have built these things. In fact, in the UK, they're already trialling them. They're trialling trucks up in Scotland, self-driving trucks, and there's a plan for this year and next year and 2019, I think it is. They're going to be testing self-driving vehicles between London and Oxford, I believe it was, I read. So, it's already coming. And I think the idea of the Johnny Cab is pretty inevitable. What's the Johnny Cab? Well, if you've ever seen Total Recall, you remember the Johnny Cab. He jumps in the back of one and this robot spins around who's driving going, "Hey, I'm Johnny Cab. Where would you like to go?" And he's like, just drive, just drive. Sure, where would you like to go? That kind of thing. I think that's inevitable. Automated self-drive vehicles inevitably will end up as taxis. Take you to where you want to go. Of course it brings up problems and questions and all the rest of it, but... You know, if you were to say to me, is a taxi driver's job something that is going to be here in 100 years' time? I'll say to you, no, it's not. That's a classic thing to get replaced by technology. The taxi driver. Classic thing. That's going to be Johnny Cab right there. In fact, it won't even take 100 years. Let's turn that off. Truck convoys. Scania showed me them 2 years ago that it's testing them. Truck convoys. The idea of, you know, 10 trucks just barreling down the highway, all like 1 meter from each other, like a road train. That's going to happen as well. In terms of ETS2 though, I think the game's going to have died and been replaced long before we'll see self-driving trucks on the road. One of the bigger questions I think I have: will car ownership be less common in the future? I don't know why I'm asking you a question. This is TMCN, you're supposed to ask me questions, but it's got me thinking. Will the need to learn to drive disappear when you've got self-driving vehicles that are almost just instantaneous? Like, you pick up the phone, call a cab, and less than 60 seconds later an automated cab turns up and takes you exactly where you want to go. And it doesn't matter where you are, it will just come to you. Are you really going to need to be driving around quite so much when you've got that kind of flexibility? Whoa, dude! Dived in between 2 trucks like a lunatic. Next question is that D6 Needham T? I can't read your name properly. I think it's D6. Do you think 128-bit CPUs will ever be a thing? If so, when? 128-bit CPUs. Wowzers. I think to answer this question, we're going to need a little bit of background here. Because not everybody listening is going to understand what the difference is between a 16, 32, 64, 128-bit CPU. It's just a number. What does it mean? Well, we are going to get technical. The bitness, if you like, should we call it that? The bitness of a CPU refers to a thing called the ALU, which is the Arithmetic Logic Unit. The ALU is the thing on board that can handle arithmetic, if you like. And the bitness, like 32-bit, 64-bit, is actually the width of the largest binary number that can handle in a single operation or instruction. That's the definition of it. Think of it like a motorway with 64 lanes, yeah? It can handle 64 bits coming into it in one go. It's like that. I'm trying to keep this simple, but it's blatantly not simple. The current generation that we have now, 64-bit processors, you know, you may have heard that Windows moved from 32-bit to 64-bit in the last few years. ETS2 is still a 32-bit process, or you can run it in 64-bit mode. But chances are, if you've got a CPU from the last few years, chances are you've got a 64-bit CPU. What the heck does that mean? Well, like I say, it means it can move 64 bits at a time. It can deal with 64 bits at a time. If we are ever going to move to 128-bit CPUs, there has to be a reason to do so. There has to be a compelling reason to do so. So what was the compelling reason that moved us from 8-bit Yeah, you must have heard the phrase 8-bit. ZX Spectrum is 8-bit. What moved us from 8-bit to 16-bit to 32 and now 64, and what is going to stop us moving to 128? What's the deal? Well, the ALU bit size, that 64-bit number, basically that also represents it represents a few things, okay, but the most important one, really, the driving factor, is the address range. It's the amount of memory that it can access. The wider that, the more bits it has available to access, the more memory it can access. Now I won't explain why, just take that for granted for now. People who run 32-bit applications, right? Like if you run ETS2 in 32-bit mode, it can only access a maximum of 4 gigabytes of RAM. Maximum. It cannot see anything beyond 4 gig, even though your machine might have 32 gigabytes installed. It still can't see more than 4 because it's a 32-bit process. And 32 bits, when you add them up, it's physically limited to about 4 gigabytes of addressable memory. That, by today's standards, is not a lot. 64-bit, on the other hand, a 64-bit processor or CPU can access 16, get this, exabytes. What the heck is an exabyte? 16 exabytes is about 16 million terabytes. Now, a terabyte is a lot of memory. Like, I've got 32 gig and that's a lot. That's nowhere near a terabyte. And to have 16 million terabytes of memory is, quite frankly, insane right now. Maybe one day you'll need you'll need 16 million terabytes of memory for Windows, but right now you don't. It's not something we're going to need for a while either. It's going to be a long time before we need that kind of memory. And the other thing is, obviously because it's an ALU, it's used for arithmetic, so it's obviously there's something to do with calculations there, right? But there aren't many applications that need 128-bit arithmetic operations. They can just do it in 64 bits, but do it slightly more slowly in more than one operation. So what I'm trying to say in a very technical way is there really is not a driver to go to 128 bits right now, and there's not going to be for quite a lot of time to come. So I don't know when we're going to go to 128 bits, but it's not going to be for a while, I don't think. Westy Dog says, have you ever thought an older piece of technology that was better than the newer equivalent, and what was it? Yep. And this is going to make you laugh. The Tonka toy. Oh, maybe not that piece of technology, but kind of is. The Tonka toy. It used to be made out of metal, and you could sit on it, and you could ride it down your driveway, and now they're all plastic and rubbish. And yes, I'm still upset about Tonka toys being plastic. Captain Crash DK comes in with the next question, where he says, hey Squirrel, what's your opinion on EV, that's electric vehicles by the way, both cars, trucks and buses and so on? Personally I think it's a good idea. I've been a truck driver myself. I mean, why keep paying for petrol and diesel when there's a better way to go? I'm going to combine that question with another question, which is from Loldeg99. Do you want a Tesla? Because a Tesla is obviously an EV, so I thought I'd just combine the two. Well then, EV, do I think they're a good idea? 1 second, let me get on this road without crashing into somebody. I think electric vehicles have a number of advantages over the combustion-powered versions. Come on, dude. There's no pollution. They're very quiet. They're extremely good performance. I mean, the acceleration on an EV is unbelievable. But they also have a number of disadvantages, don't they? They're very quiet, meaning pedestrians can't hear them coming. They have quite a long charge time currently. You know, you can't just spend 5 minutes at the fuel station and fill up again. You've got to stand there for 2 hours at the moment. Hopefully that's going to get better, but it's still a disadvantage at the moment. The acoustics are boring. You sit in an EV and it's like... You sit in a nice V8 or a V6 and it sounds better, doesn't it? It's a bit like Formula 1 versus Formula E. There's just some kind of lost sense of soul here. But they're pretty inevitable as well. As for your statements, why paying for why paying for petrol or diesel? Well, don't forget, you're still going to have to pay for electricity you consume, so you're going to be paying for something. You're not going to get a free ride out of this. Would I like a Tesla? Yep. I was in Frankfurt in August, and I sat in a Tesla. Took pictures. They're incredibly simple design inside. Pretty cool, actually. However, Teslas are very expensive. But I would buy one just because I believe in Elon Musk's vision. I think he's a real visionary of our generation. And I really like what he stands for. I'd buy one for that reason. But finances are finances, aren't they? And the cost of a Tesla is pretty high. 1 second. Let me just double check before we turn in here that we're parking. Yes, we are. Okay. Before we commit ourselves. Most car manufacturers now have come out recently and said that they've now got an EV plan. Mercedes-Benz, I think, recently said, you know, we're going to make EV vehicles across our entire range by I forget what they said now, 2021, 2020? I can't remember. Not long. Basically, they're all at it. They're all getting into EV. They've all realised they've been asleep at the wheel. A bit like Microsoft with its browser back in the early days. Yeah, and they've all suddenly going, oh, we better start getting into this whole EV thing. What that means is eventually, you know, and charging points are appearing all over the country all the time now, so it's going to happen. But it also means that electric vehicles are going to get cheaper and cheaper as more of them start to be manufactured by all the big car makers. Which then leaves me wondering, what is Tesla going to do when it actually has some real competition? I don't even know if that's going to straighten up in there, you know. The problem is I had the gate mod installed. And the gate mod forced me to take a slightly wider swing, didn't it? See if we can convince this to go back in. Now it's starting to squirm. Is it possible to drive around here, I wonder? Mostly possible. Come on, game. There we go. Just needed a bit of convincing. Let's drop that off. Okay, Excelente, 663 Ks. And 41,000 and 1,000 XP, which takes us halfway along to the next one. Pretty good. Let's have one more question while we're driving around to some parking points from Halivard Moberg. He says, there's been confirmation of flying cars being under development and prototypes coming out in the next couple of years. When flying cars have been mass-produced, how much money would you spend on one, and do you think it will help the flow of traffic? How much money would you spend on one? Crikey. Well, first of all, cars are road vehicles. So if they're flying, then they're not a car. Are they? Technicalities. But seriously, aviation industry, and I know this because I'm doing my private pilot's license, the aviation industry is heavily regulated and controlled. Now, I know you think, yeah, I know that, but no, seriously, it's beyond what you can probably imagine. It's completely insane. Everything has to be certified, signed off by qualified engineers and installers. And, you know, good reason as well, to be honest. Let's see where we're going here. Let's go to a fuel station down the road. With pretty good reason, I would say, because gravity, you know, it doesn't stop just because you've got a failure on your plane. And when something falls out the sky, bad things happen. So even if we got to a point where people can fly cars or something else, all current pilots have to be trained. And they're checked regularly for medical fitness. So maybe the only flying stuff we're going to see is when the automation side of it comes along. And, you know, they can fly us around and we don't need to be medically certified and trained as pilots because, well, the stuff will do it for us. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. But even if we could get a flying car, how much would I pay for one? I honestly don't know. I've no idea. It's probably beyond what most people would be, you know, able to pay, because flying is not cheap. It never is. It's never cheap. It's way more, you know, expensive to defy gravity up there than it is to fly, you know, drive along the road. But if we ever manage to make it commonplace, then yeah, I think we're gonna solve some traffic problems. By going vertically, why wouldn't we? But maybe it's going to take a technological advancement before we can get to that point. Job delivered. TMCN done. Thank you so much for your questions. I hope you enjoyed this episode of TMCN. Please give me a thumbs up if you did. In the next one, I'll be doing technology part 2. So until then, take care. Happy trucking.